What is going on, y'all? Faiz Sports Talk back at it with another video, and I've got a very special guest with me today. We've got Nicholas Moreano from the Chicago Audible. Nick, thank you so much for joining me, man. How are you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I could be better, obviously, after the season the Bears had, but you know what? Can't complain. It is what it is. So, yeah, I've been wanting to connect with Nick and the guys over at Chicago Audible. They do great work, so I will definitely post their channel and how you guys can reach out to them. They're great for Bears coverage. So we're just going to really pick at Nick's brain here. I think he's one of the best guys to talk about the Bears with. So, Nick, I'm not even going to hold back. I'm coming at you full force here, all right? Season just ended. I don't even know if you've had time to reflect on it, go back, watch tape. But I'm just going to have to ask you, from what the season started and the expectations that you had, do you consider the 2020-2021 Bear season a success?
Absolutely not. I think when you look at it and what kind of happened in this season, they had to rely on the Rams to beat the Cardinals to actually get into the playoffs. And that's where I think people can maybe label this season as a success. They made the playoffs in the past 2-3 years. They made it twice. Yeah, you need some help to do it, and they had to beat up on some bad teams to really put them in a position to even get there in the first place. They beat one team that ended up having a above record over 500, 1-6, right, against the better teams in the NFL. So we know the Bears could beat up on some bad teams, but when it comes to playing the competitors in the league, the teams that are going to make legitimate playoff runs, they're not so good. You know what, Faiz? If they would have beat the Packers – right, and clinched their own way to get into the playoffs, regardless of what would have happened to the Saints game, I probably would have labeled it as a success, because you saw that if that would have happened, like, they finally got over the hump. They did it their own way. They clinched their playoffs on their own terms, right, but that didn't happen. It was like every other Bears-Packers game that all Bears fans have been accustomed to seeing. So definitely in my eyes, and I think should be in a lot of Bears fans' eyes, it's labeled as not a disaster, but it's definitely not a success.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And, you know, I'm pretty optimistic too, but when you have to depend on another team to help you get in, and also, let's be honest, the Bears got into the playoffs off of technicality. The NFL put in an extra wild card spot. So if that wasn't the case, you know, we're probably sitting home 1 week earlier. So I totally agree there. I'm sure most Bears fans would, even though I'm sure when, you know, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, which we'll get to in a second here, probably went to management, and they probably said, hey, look, we made the playoffs again. So speaking of Matt Nagy and Mitchell Trubisky, look, I think the Bears made their bed now for this next year with Pace and Nagy. And I had been telling, you know, my subs and everybody that it was either going to be Pace and Nagy coming back and together. They're a package to me, because Pace hired Nagy, and Mitch not coming back, or Mitch coming back and Pace and Nagy not coming back. So, one, it's a two-part question. Are you surprised that the Bears picked Pace and Nagy over Mitch? And two, why do you believe the Nagy-Trubisky relationship never worked out?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of that question, I'm not too surprised. The Bears need a fallout guy. They really did. Last year, it was a couple of the coaches. And, you know, now it's going to be Chuck Pagano and Mitch Trubisky, even though, ironically, it was because of how Mitch Trubisky was playing down the stretch. The Bears were even in a spot to make the playoffs. So it didn't surprise me that management liked what maybe Matt Nagy and also Ryan Pace, what they had accomplished. That was the big thing at the press conference. Like, you look at the body of it didn't really surprise me that they kind of chose them and each one of those guys, and you put Ted Phillips and, you know, George McCaskey in there. They needed more at the quarterback position. Everyone said that. But in terms of the relationship, I think you had to put more blame, I would say, on Matt Nagy. And I say this because, look, Mitchell Trubisky, to his credit, did everything that you want a quarterback to do. He was there early. He committed to whatever the playbook was and really gave it his all in terms of what he could accomplish. Now, he does all the good things. He just can't play quarterback, which is kind of a problem when you're a quarterback, right? But Matt Nagy, I would say, is this. Like, there's been I wouldn't say reports, but it seems like there's an ego, sometimes maybe a stubbornness to him and how you can change your offense. Look, all what coaching is about is putting the players that you have in a position to succeed and doing that whatever way possible. If you knew Mitchell Trubisky had limitations, reading an entire football field, going through his progressions, and just really being able to dissect the defense, why didn't we see these design rollouts, these play action passes, moving him outside the pocket earlier instead of the last 5 or 6 games of the 2020 NFL season? That's on Matt Nagy. That's on Bill Lazor. That's on the coaching. So I would put more of the blame on Nagy not trying. He had an offense set, but he was so set on wanting to run it his way that even though Mitchell Trubisky had these limitations, he still wanted to see if he could do it, and clearly he can't. So I would put more of the blame on Matt Nagy, but look, it's kind of tough to do your thing when you do have a quarterback that is handicapped like Mitchell Trubisky is. So more of the blame on Nagy, but I think both played a big part in this relationship really not working.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the guy I always go back to is Sean McVay. I don't think Jared Goff is elite by any means, but Sean McVay is such a good coach that he makes it work with Jared Goff, right? And he took Jared Goff to the Super Bowl. So it's all about the cards you're dealt with. I just don't believe Matt Nagy, was able to make lemonade out of lemons. Let's just say that, okay? So speaking of now, all of this, negativity that Bears fans know about Nagy, still the McCaskies decide to keep Pace and Nagy. So I go back and I'm thinking, okay, it makes no sense, right? Well, there's got to be a reason. So my theory is that Pace and Nagy either tried to convince the McCaskies or ended up convincing them, because they're coming back, that they're going to go all in again in 2021. Or else in my head, it doesn't make sense. So I'll ask you, why do you think the McCaskies kept Nagy and Pace? And would you have done the same? And if not, are you saying you're ready to do a full rebuild if you don't bring them back?
Yeah, so to answer the first part, I think they kept them because clearly in the end of the year press conference, they just like good people, right? It's all about having good people. That's what they Ted Phillips was stating, what makes a successful organization. It's not the wins and losses. And right when he said that, I'm like, okay, all right, Ted, we see where your head's at. But it's about the people. And credit to, I've met Matt Nagy, I've met Ryan Pace. They are good people. No doubt about that. I don't think there's any question about the people. But in this cutthroat league, you need to be better than just a good person. Someone's always going to have a chipper attitude and a smile on your face. But I think that was ultimately one of the reasons. They are good people, but they obviously believe what they're doing. Maybe they look, okay, in the past 3 years, we have made the playoffs twice. And, with Ryan Pace in the draft these past couple of years, he has found some gems. Like they mentioned a Darnell Mooney in the draft. They also mentioned Jalen Johnson. So some guys that they just got. So they obviously believe in where this could be going. But you look at the last 2 seasons, once Vic Fangio leaves and that defense that carried the team to 12 wins, 8-8 again. So I think, it comes down to which, look, this is not going to work for any NFL organization. They're good people, and they believe in whatever is kind of happening there at Hallis Hall. And then the second part in terms of what I've kept them, look, I think I've seen enough of Ryan Pace, and then to want to bring him back. And big reason is because they made such a focal point about this is the offseason about acquiring a quarterback. You want the guy that obviously moved up to get Trubisky. Oh, he got Mike Glennon for reinsurance. Yeah. Hey, Nick Foles too. You want that guy to pick the next quarterback? That gives me that gives me no confidence. And for Bears fans, what makes you think that now, after 6 years going into 7, they can finally get it right? He missed the home run ball on Watson and Mahomes, and then even just however the collaboration worked to get Nick Foles. That's what you want? That's not what I think is going to be the best case for the Bears. So I would have cut ties with Pace and let the next general manager kind of figure out what he wants to do with Nagy, because obviously he was labeled as an offensive guru.
Yeah.
When is that going to be the case? So that's my issue with that. But now in terms of a rebuild, I know a lot of what the guys were saying, Ted Phillips, George McCaskey, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, it seems like this 2021 NFL season, they're all in.
Yeah.
The problem with that is it's not like, okay, you get a quarterback and everything's fixed. Like, even as throughout the course of the 2020 NFL season, there were plenty of other issues than just a quarterback. The offensive line was not stable. They kind of figured things out a little bit towards the end. Allen Robinson, is that man going to be back? If not, you have a huge hole at wide receiver, and there's no guarantee that Anthony Miller, after he sucker punched, Gardner Johnson, that he's going to be back. So you have holes on the offense. The defense clearly regressed. Can you count on Robert Quinn? Do you have to add another young edge rusher to pair with, Travis Gibson, who they just drafted? Like, there are holes on this defense as well. Nickel corner being another spot that you have to look at. Like, okay, if this is an all-in season, how are you going to address all the issues that are currently on this Bears team? And that doesn't even go to coaching, where you have to find a new defensive coordinator. Maybe Jay Rodgers, as defensive line coach, is the guy. But would this would be his first time calling plays in a must-win season? Can you take that risk? And obviously he knows the people there in the locker room, but that's also something to think about. So, yeah, it's like they could present it as being a all-in season, but just getting a new quarterback is not going to fix everything.
Right. And let me just piggyback off that and ask you, you pointed out the holes on this roster, and I agree with you. There are definitely more holes in quarterback. But are the Bears closer to the basement than they are to the elite? And I'll let you answer that, but also just keep in mind here, when we're talking about 2021, because Bears fans need to understand this. I feel like there's a sect of Bears fans that want the Bears to do it right, but they're not willing to wait to get it right. Because a rebuild, yeah, you can go from last to first in a year, but the last time before 2018, we were, a playoff team, I think it was like 2010. So it takes a while. So when we're talking about a rebuild, do you see that the Bears, if they do rebuild, we're like 5 years away from being elite, or it can be pretty quick?
Again, with the holes that they have, and there's no guarantee they get quarterback right, it's probably going to be longer than Bears fans would like if they decide like this is a full rebuild. Yeah. But like the interesting question that you asked, are they close to the basement or being an actual competitor? I mean, just look how they've competed with teams that are not elite, but the better teams in the league, 1-6.
Yeah.
And they could beat up on some pretty bad teams. That's fantastic. But if you look at just how the offense has not taken steps forward until the last 4 games against some of the last ranked defenses, seeing that the defense did regress, and you have guys like Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Roquan Smith, like Eddie Jackson, these stud players, and it still regressed. Nothing gives me confidence that they're going to go into 2021 saying we're here to compete. Like there really isn't. And that's the, I guess the fact of the matter is that the Bears, they thought they were ready to compete after the 2018 season, which I think just accelerated everything, because that was an unexpected season by, I think, a lot of people. No one was expecting the Bears to be this good. So that, I think, accelerated the clock. We need to get this going now. And now we've seen that defense covered up a lot of the holes that are currently on this roster. And even were there in 2018, but it covered it up.
Yep.
So now I think they're really closer to the basement than they are to actually making a legitimate contender. They can't even, like, if you can't compete with the Packers, which the Bears haven't been able to do in the last 2 decades, honestly, then I think that kind of shows where the Bears are at. So I would definitely say it's going to be a longer rebuild, and they're closer to the basement, if anything.
And you know what? That's the cold, hard truth, Nick, and Bears fans need to realize that. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, because obviously pacing that year back and we could go all in, but if we want to do this thing right, you guys better not complain for like the next couple seasons saying, oh, the Bears suck. We need to suck so that we can get back to being good, right? So I totally get there. So here's kind of, I think, how I can put a bow on everything here. I feel like Ryan Pace is staying up every single night, scheming up a master plan of how the heck he's going to extend his job after this season, all right? And I believe his mind is quarterback. All right, so there's some interesting names. I believe, on the market. I'm not saying they're available right now, but I am saying that there are options that I think could be there. So obviously the elephant in the room, Deshaun Watson. We know it would take, a huge, huge amount of assets to get him. Starting price, probably 3 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a young player. Then we have Matt Stafford. Will the new GM regime keep him, trade him? Matt Ryan. They just got Arthur Smith as the new head coach. Will they keep him, trade him? Sam Darnold. Is he going to be moved with the number 2 pick from the Jets? Maybe even a guy like a Derek Carr. Is John Gruden tired of him? Does he want to go with Mariota? There are veteran options. And if you want to throw in rookie quarterback saying that you think Pace is going to, trade up, that's fine too. I'm of the mindset that he's looking more at veteran quarterbacks if he's trying to win. Of those names I just listed, who is the most realistic option that you feel like Bears fans can say, okay, there is a shot?
That's a very good question. And I think I don't know if this isn't a legitimate option, but everything that's coming out of Houston, it seems like Deshaun Watson is ticked off.
Yeah.
And
really,
I don't know how an organization can do that to, a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the league, but they somehow did it. And Ryan Pace is probably just hoping, hey, keep that same mindset. And what was said in the press conference, what makes me believe that anything's on the table, is that he said, Ryan Pace, we have all the resources. You just gave Ryan Pace the green light. It's like giving a kid a credit card in a candy store, go get what you want. Ryan Pace doesn't have an issue with salvage or getting rid of future assets, future first-round picks. We've seen him do it plenty of times. So could it be an option? Maybe. For some reason, it's actually a name that you didn't mention. And I don't know if this is just a weird, itch on my back or something. I don't know what this is.
Let's hear
it. Why does, again, Carson Wentz is a guy who is in a similar system. And the contract is awful. He took major steps back. And I'm not saying this is a good move. I'm just saying that it could be one. Right. But if you're looking for someone that could win now, who knows the system, and you have all the resources to give whatever you want to go get them, it just could be another guy that the Bears could possibly be thinking about. I think Nick Foles will be back, and we know those two have a great chemistry with each other. Matt Nagy obviously is really good friends with Doug Pearson, who is no longer there in Philadelphia, but that's just a name. Throughout the course of the week, I'm like, is Carson Wentz going to be a legitimate option for the Bears? We see the Bears make all the wrong moves before. Could this just be another wrong move that they eventually make? But I think that would be something maybe Bears fans should think about, because the Eagles are going to get rid of him. Someone's going to be that team to give them what they want. Maybe they negotiate whatever. But I know Derek Carr was a guy that a lot of Bears fans liked last year, and maybe you just need that stable, consistent kind of guy that, hey, he's going to hit the check downs, but I think you can feel comfortable with. And that's all we kind of ever wanted Mitch Trubisky to be, and he never was able to do that.
Absolutely.
So a lot of enticing options, maybe even looking at free agents. What if Bears kind of Dak Prescott, or I was thinking what if a Ryan Fitzpatrick, but you also have the young quarterback, and you do kind of what the Miami Dolphins did.
I hear you.
They kind of bring him in as the closer, or you can have Fitzpatrick start, and then let's say you draft a Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and they're not ready to start. Yeah. Maybe midway, half point in the season, you see that, hey, whatever rookie quarterback it is, they know how to get in the huddle. They understand the progressions of the plays. They're getting the offense. All right, Fitzpatrick, we're sorry we're going to have to do this again. Put in the rookie, see if he can take you to the promised land. But I think that Brian Flores kind of just presented a new way of handling the quarterback position. Maybe some quarterbacks are fragile. I think that's why Carson Wentz is sick of being with Doug Pearson. But that could be an option. And if the Bears need to win now, I think they need to get somebody that they feel comfortable with starting, and maybe it is Nick Foles again. In the press conference that the Bears had, it kind of seemed like Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, they're kind of making up, not making excuses, but they're saying, hey, the offensive line wasn't good. The running backs weren't set. He got injured. There wasn't an offseason. So they're kind of backing up Foles. So he could just be the guy, and then they draft a young guy as well. But man, it's so many options.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited when you mention Nick Foles as a starter. if you thought Bears fans were pissed at Ryan Pace now, if he trades for like a Carson Wentz or starts Nick Foles, like they might have the pitchforks out for him. So, last question here, Nick, and then I'll get you out of here. Appreciate everything so far. We're entering a very dark chapter for a lot of Bears fans, not all, a lot, which is possibly, I'm not confirming it, but possibly the end of the Mitchell Trubisky era. Okay? Again, no decision has been made. His contract is over, so the Bears don't have to do anything. They don't have to waive him, trade him, whatnot. But one, do you believe Mitchell Trubisky's career in Chicago is done? And two, this is the part where Bears fans nag me all the time. If he goes and has a Ryan Tannehill-like renaissance with another team, should Bears fans feel bad?
No, I don't think they should feel bad. If anything, I think Mitchell Trubisky's he's done everything right, like we said earlier. And so if he does revives his career somewhere else, like I would be rooting for Mitch Trubisky. Like this is the guy when we saw him get drafted number 2, everyone was shocked. And we did a live podcast and my face was like, what? We drafted Trubisky. But he does everything right. He's such a nice guy. And I think that if he were to have a resurgence somewhere, I think Bears fans would be like, well, why couldn't we get, the most out of him here? But I'm glad he's having that. And to answer your first question, I do think it's over. I really do. Unless it's some kind of very team-friendly deal. We know Trubisky thinks like there's some unfinished business, I think is how he put in his quote here in Chicago. And yeah, there is, but it probably doesn't, entail you being the quarterback anymore, Trubisky. So I think it will ultimately end. But if he goes on to who knows? Maybe it's New England or maybe it's San Francisco. Who knows? But I think that Bears fans, I think they will support him ultimately because he is just a really good guy.
Yeah, and keep this in mind, folks. Like, listen, after a while, you are also responsible for your production on the field. The guy we just talked about, Deshaun Watson, I always say, he got a bad coach, a bad O-line, a bad defense. He still made it work. Right? The talent has to shine. And Mitchell Trubisky, this is the one thing I feel like all Bears fans should be able to agree on. He had multiple chances in Chicago to prove he's the guy, run away with the job. He was just never able to do it. Just wasn't in the cards for him. It is what it is. So that's where we'll leave it at. But thank you, Nick. Appreciate you so much, man. I hope we get to do this again. I know it's going to be a very interesting offseason, so definitely don't think this will be the last time I'll be talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And look, I'm looking forward to coming on the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, again, make sure to follow the Chicago Audible and Nick. I will put the links for his channel and also his social media info down in the description. As always, thanks for watching.